Hey everyone, it's Jim
And Charles
from Mellow Amps. And we're going to continue to populate the PCB, and we're going to do all of the small capacitors now. And we'll just do them one type at a time, and before you know it, they'll be on the board. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so let's start with the single one. That's C7. That's 1,000 microfarad, 50 volt, and it's an electrolytic. So Charles is going to show you how they band electrolytics.
Okay, so there's multiple ways that they show you which side is positive. So we have a positive and a negative lead here. It's also known as polarized. And you'll see one lead is longer than the other. The longer lead is the positive, the shorter lead is the negative. And on the side of the capacitor, we see this white line, often with these dashes.
Or racetracks.
And that also marks the negative. Now, on the board side, we have a positive marked and we have a negative marked, but we also have a band. And that band lines up with this band right here. So to get the polarity right, we just put it in with the band facing the band, and there we go.
Now, caution everyone, if you put an electrolytic capacitor in backwards in a circuit, there's a very good chance it'll blow up. So it's well worthwhile taking your time and making sure you get them all in. Little capacitors like this will make a little pop. Later on, when we put the large filter capacitors in, they'll make a bigger bang, and I don't recommend you test it to find out how big a bang.
Okay, so we're going to come in here at around 360 Celsius, which is about 680 Fahrenheit.
I think I've only ever done a pop once, and it was cute.
Yeah.
It was a small capacitor, and it went pop. And I knew right away what I had done.
Yeah, we're usually trying to be very careful with our labeling, and this is one of those components that's going to be fairly heat sensitive. So you don't want to stay on it for too long. I'm going to preload my iron, come in, hold, feed some solder, and there it goes.
Yeah, and you might have noticed that Charles bent the leads over a little bit more than usual, and the reason for that is we want the capacitors to sit nice and snug on the board.
Actually, I should have shown that a little bit better. You see how it's sitting flat there? Don't solder it down until you've inspected this and made sure that it is actually sitting low like that.
Oh, you did an excellent job.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and trim the leads on those, and then we'll move on to the next electrolytics. See you back in a second.
Okay, so up next are the C1s. They are 47 microfarad, 450 volts. You might notice that we use Nichicon electrolytics. Electrolytics are one of those components that have a finite lifespan. So it's well worth spending the big bucks and buying a high quality manufactured capacitor. Nichicon is one of the best. The Japanese made capacitors are some of the best. There are some European ones as well that are very good.
And it's always a good idea to buy ones that are oversized in terms of their voltage handling as well.
Yes.
Okay, so these are going to go in the exact same way as the C7 just did. We've got our bands facing inward. That's the negative side.
Yeah, so don't get fooled. So they actually are a mirror image. So they'll come in and they'll look like this with the bands facing the middle. I think you know what you're doing. So hop to it and we'll see you back in a minute. Okay, so that's what they should look like. And let's just flip them over because actually there's something valuable sitting over here that's not garbage. These leads are really high quality, and I like to save the longer ones. The short ones I'm going to throw out. But so I have a little bin of leads, and you never know when you need a nice high quality, nice gauge jumper wire for something. So
it's good to save them if you are into electronics and tinkering and making kits like this.
Yeah, everybody should have a little scrap bin of wire, of leads, of components. You never know when you need something.
Okay, so next up we have our coupling capacitors on the input.
Now, we'll talk a little bit later on about the purpose of these things, but these are non-polarized. In fact, this is a high-quality coupling capacitor made by Vishay, and these are wonderful because you can't tell they're in the circuit. They don't color the sound, they don't take anything away, they pass the full audio band with no changes to it. So You might say, what in the heck kind of capacitor is that? It's not electrolytic. Well, this is a metallized polypropylene type, and they all have different acronyms to describe sort of their composition and their build. In this case, they're called MPETs. There's other types that are MKTs, MKTEs, MPTs. It just goes on and on. But they're all essentially the same technology.
Yeah, so these are going to go in the C5A and the C5B spot, and this is the first time we're working with a component that has a label that you can rotate. And so we want to make sure that we have the labels facing upward, so if somebody is working on this later, they know what they need to replace this with if there's a damaged one, and we'd like to also keep them aligned with each other. So it's going to go right here. And so we're going to have a fairly tight bend off of that. And let me just find our little skewer tool. So you see, I'm going to hold this out here and come in right on the tip and do a fairly hard 90-degree bend. There we go. And let's see how that fits.
And I think we can solder at our standard 360 C, 680 Fahrenheit.
Perfect. There we go. So we're going to go ahead and put that in just like we did with the other capacitors, and we'll put the other one in facing the same direction with the label out, and we'll see you back here in a second.
Okay, so we just got the pads soldered in, and Charles is going to have to touch up because we didn't quite do a good flow through.
That's probably fine, but we're being picky.
Now, the reason why we're going to show this is because you've got to be careful. All capacitors, whether they're electrolytic or film caps like this, have a fairly delicate heat shrunk casing on it. In fact, even the writing will come off, the printing will come off quite easy. So if you're cleaning your board later on, don't get any alcohol on this. It'll just strip it right off. Mm-hmm. So you can't bring any heat to this.
Yeah, don't touch it with your iron. You're going to melt right through it. So I'm going to come in carefully from the other side.
Yeah, so whenever you have a slightly tricky job or a very tricky job, always take time to get your workspace and yourself oriented. And then you can do a nice, neat job. You get in, you get out, and yeah, Bob's your uncle. Okay, so both your capacitors should be nice and neat like that on the board.
And we have some nice leads to save here too, so we're going to get those clipped off, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Good job.